A single line drawn on a map usually divides. It creates an edge, a hard boundary where one world ends and another begins. But there is a place in the high heart of Asia where two empires drew two parallel lines instead, stretching out like a long, impossibly narrow finger of Earth. It spans hundreds of miles, yet in some places it is so narrow you can stand in the middle and hear the dogs barking in two different countries on either side. Most maps treat this strip of land as a historical curiosity, a geographic anomaly born of Victorian-era paranoia. The world looks at the borders surrounding it and imagines a landscape of tension, a volatile fracture zone trapped between crashing civilizations. But if you actually stand on the valley floor, the noise of global politics evaporates into an eerie, profound silence. What you find instead is a sanctuary of radical peace. The people here do not live in the shadow of war, they live in the shadow of stone. It is a world where time has not stopped, but rather loops in harmony with the freezing and thawing of glacial ice. To understand Asia, one must understand this bottleneck. It is the geographic hinge where the Indian subcontinent, Central Asia, and the Far East attempt to touch but are held apart by a wall of rock. It is a place that everyone who studies geography has seen on a globe, yet almost no one actually knows. It is not a barrier, but a bridge, a hidden corridor through the roof of the world that has quietly dictated the flow of human movement for thousands of years. To understand why this corridor exists, one must look at the Earth from space, where the crust of the planet appears violently crumpled. This is the Pamir Knot, the geological collision zone where three of the Earth's most fearsome mountain ranges, the Hindu Kush, the Karakoram and the Pamirs, smash into one another. The result is a chaotic labyrinth of vertical rock, a fortress of ice where peaks routinely pierce 20,000 feet into the atmosphere. The valleys below are not wide, fertile plains. They are deep, sheer-sided trenches carved over millennia by moving ice. The Wakhan Corridor is the most significant of these trenches. It is a physical funnel shaped by the elements. To the north, the mountains of Tajikistan rise in jagged walls of grey schist. To the south, the snowfields of Pakistan's northern frontier present an impassable barrier of white. The valley floor itself sits at an altitude that would make coastal dwellers gasp for breath, starting at 9,000 feet and rising steadily as it moves east toward the Chinese border. This extreme elevation creates its own rules of physics and weather. Water is the true architect of life within this stone corridor. The Wakhan River, a silty, roaring torrent fed by the melting glaciers of the high peaks, snakes through the center of the valley. It splits into dozens of braided channels, creating a mosaic of silver water ribbons that slice through the gravel beds. This river is both a lifeline and an obstacle. In the heat of midsummer, when the glaciers melt rapidly, the river swells into a violent flood, cutting off villages from one another and reshaping the valley floor overnight. In the winter, the water freezes solid, turning into a highway of slick, blue ice that the inhabitants use to travel between settlements when the mountain tracks become choked with snow. The wind here is a constant, living entity. It sweeps down from the high Tibetan plateau to the east, channeled by the narrow valley walls into a perpetual gale. It carries with it a fine, abrasive dust that polishes the boulders and coats the sparse vegetation in a layer of grey. This wind ensures that nothing grows tall. There are no sweeping forests here. only stunted willows hugging the riverbanks and low-lying cushions of thorny shrubs that have adapted to survive the relentless gales and sub-zero temperatures. When you drop down from the high ridges into the small settlements that dot the valley floor, the monochromatic world of rock and ice suddenly shatters. The first thing that strikes the senses is color, specifically a brilliant, burning crimson. The women of the Wakhan wear long, layered dresses and heavy headscarves, a stark, intentional contrast to the pale grey mud of their homes and the white of the surrounding peaks. As they move through the fields or walk along the dusty tracks, they look like moving sparks of fire against a frozen landscape. Daily life here is dictated by the absolute limits of the agricultural calendar. The growing season is brutally short, lasting only a few precious months between the late spring thaw and the early autumn freezes. Human existence is centered around small terraced plots of land reclaimed from the gravel riverbanks. Here, using wooden plows pulled by pairs of heavy, grunting yaks, the inhabitants cultivate barley. Every square inch of arable soil is treated like gold. The fields are irrigated by an intricate network of hand-dug stone channels that divert the cold glacial meltwater from the high peaks down to the crops. The sound of running water in these channels is the background music of the Wakhan summer, a soft, gurgling counterpoint to the howling wind. The architecture of the homes is an ancient response to the extreme climate. From the outside, a Waki house looks like nothing more than a collection of low, flat-roofed mud cubes that blend seamlessly into the hillsides. They are built low to the ground to escape the fierce winds, with thick walls made of river stone and sun-dried mud bricks that insulate against the winter cold. But step inside and you enter a highly symbolic, sacred space. The traditional house is designed around 5 central wooden pillars, each representing an ancient spiritual pillar of protection. A central skylight, the Rauzan, is the only source of natural light, throwing a dramatic, shifting beam of sunshine across the smoky interior throughout the day. It serves as both a clock and a calendar, as the angle of the sunbeam on the interior walls tells the family exactly when to plant their crops and when to prepare for the snows. Food in the Wakhan is a direct reflection of this landscape, minimalist, calorie-dense, and deeply comforting. There are no markets filled with imported goods, no grocery stores, no refrigeration. Everything consumed is produced within the valley. The staple of every meal is naan, a thick, heavy flatbread baked against the inside walls of mud ovens. This is paired with endless bowls of shir chai, a rich, savory tea brewed with yak milk, salt, and a dollop of clarified butter. It is a drink designed not for refreshment, but for survival, coating the throat against the dry air and providing the vital fats needed to keep the body warm when the temperature drops far below freezing. Though the Wakhan feels like the edge of the earth today, it was once one of the busiest roundabouts of the ancient world. The valley floor is littered with the physical ghosts of an era when this corridor was a vital artery of the Silk Road. If you climb the crumbling ridges above the river, you stumble upon the ruins of massive stone fortresses, their watchtowers still pointing like broken teeth toward the sky. These fortresses, built from local granite and clay, were not designed to hold territory. They were built to collect taxes and protect trade caravans from bandits. For centuries, this valley was the preferred route for merchants traveling between the Mediterranean and the heart of China. It was chosen precisely because it was secure. The sheer verticality of the mountains meant that anyone entering the valley was trapped within its walls. There were no hidden side valleys for raiders to ambush from, and no easy escape routes. The most famous travelers of antiquity walked these exact paths. Buddhist monks from China passed through the Wakhan on their way to India, seeking the original scriptures of their faith. They left behind small rock-cut shrines and inscriptions carved into the boulders along the river, blessings written in ancient scripts that have long since faded from common use. Marco Polo walked this valley in the 13th century, describing the immense size of the wild sheep that still roam the high crags, animals that now bear his name. His journals speak of the intense cold and the fact that fires here do not burn with the same heat as at sea level due to the thinness of the air, an observation that every modern visitor confirms within their first night in the corridor. The history of the Wakhan is not recorded in textbooks or libraries, it is etched directly into the physical landscape. It is found in the petroglyphs carved onto smooth river boulders, depicting ibex with impossibly long horns and hunters with bows and arrows. It is found in the fragments of ancient pottery that wash out of the mudbanks during the spring floods. This history is not an academic exercise for the people who live here. It is a physical reality they walk past every day when they take their animals to pasture. The ruins are not fenced off or preserved. They are part of the scenery, slowly dissolving back into the earth from which they were dug. Beyond the settled agricultural villages of the lower valley lies a completely different world, the Pamirs. This is the Great Pamir and the Little Pamir, wide, high-altitude valleys that sit above 12,000 feet. Here, the landscape changes from a narrow stone trench into an immense rolling steppe of pale grass and gravel, surrounded by low, rounded mountains covered in permanent snowfields. This is the domain of the Kyrgyz, a separate group of nomadic herders who inhabit the absolute roof of the world. The system that keeps life moving in this upper world is entirely pastoral. The Kyrgyz do not plant crops. The altitude makes agriculture impossible. Instead, their lives are entirely dependent on their herds of yaks, sheep, and goats. The yak is the undisputed engine of existence here. It is an animal built for this environment, possessed of a thick, shaggy coat that can withstand 50 degrees below zero temperatures, and lungs that thrive on thin air. The yak provides everything: rich, fatty milk that is turned into hard, sun-dried cheese, wool for clothing and tent felt, meat for winter survival, and dung, which is the only fuel available in a landscape completely devoid of wood. Collecting and drying yak dung is a daily chore, and the sweet, pungent smell of its smoke is the definitive scent of the high Pamirs. The human footprint in the upper valley is impermanent by design. The Kyrgyz live in yurts, circular, domed tents made of a lattice wooden frame covered in thick sheets of sheep felt. These structures are aerodynamic marvels, able to deflect the violent winds that scream across the high steppe without collapsing. Inside, the yurts are insulated with layers of brightly woven carpets, creating a warm, colourful cocoon against the hostile world outside. A yurt settlement can be packed down and loaded onto the backs of camels within a few hours, allowing the herders to move their animals to new pastures as the seasons dictate. This high-altitude migration is a complex, delicate system of resource management. The pastures are fragile, consisting of sparse, nutrient-rich grasses that grow in the brief summer window. The herders must constantly calculate the carrying capacity of the land, moving their animals between winter camps sheltered in deep rocky alcoves and summer pastures high up near the edges of the retreating glaciers. It is a lifestyle of intense physical isolation. There are no roads here, no telephone poles, no cellular signals. The only connection between the scattered yurt camps is the network of horse tracks that cross the high passes, tracks that are frequently wiped out by blizzards or landslides. Today, the Wakhan Corridor exists as a strange island of complete stability within a volatile continent. While the geopolitics of the surrounding nations shift and fracture, life inside the corridor continues with a rhythmic predictability that feels almost defiant. The infrastructure of the modern world has only just begun to touch the edges of this place. There is a single unpaved dirt track that runs along the riverbed from the western entrance of the valley, a road so rough that it destroys tires and suspensions within a few dozen miles. In many places, the road simply disappears into the river, forcing vehicles to wait for the early morning hours when the water is lowest to pass. This lack of infrastructure is both a curse and a preservation mechanism. Because there are no bridges, no heavy transport links, and no industrial developments, the environment remains pristine. The air is so clear that mountains 50 miles away look close enough to touch. And the night sky is an explosion of stars unmarred by a single speck of artificial light pollution. But this isolation means that modern medical care is almost non-existent. If someone falls seriously ill in the upper reaches of the valley, the only option is to transport them for days on the back of a donkey or horse over high passes to the nearest basic clinic. Yet, despite these hardships, there is a profound sense of contentment that permeates the valley. The people here are acutely aware of the chaos that has defined the regions outside their mountain walls, and they view their geographical isolation not as a prison but as a shield. They have created a highly functioning society based entirely on mutual reliance and communal trust. In a world where food security is always balanced on a knife edge, no one eats unless everyone eats. If a family loses their herd to a winter wolf attack or a sudden blizzard, the rest of the village pools their animals to restore the flock. It is a social contract written not on paper, but in the collective survival instinct of a community that knows the mountains will show no mercy to an individual standing alone. Money holds little value in the deep corners of the Wakhan. The economy is still driven by barter. A sheep is traded for a sack of wheat, a pair of yak leather boots for a bundle of firewood. The few items that come from the outside world, solar panels, plastic buckets, small Chinese radios, are integrated into the existing way of life rather than replacing it. You will see a solar panel strapped to the top of a mud house, its wire running through the ancient smoke hole to charge a single LED light bulb or a mobile phone used primarily as a flashlight. The core of the culture remains completely unswayed by the digital age. This isolation is not just a geographic boundary, it is a seasonal rhythm written into the very soul of the valley. The Wakhan's short golden summer is choked out overnight by a sky the color of bruised iron. The first winter storm doesn't arrive gently, it screams in, burying the high passes and sealing the corridor off for the next 6 months. Life contracts entirely indoors. Crimson dresses disappear beneath heavy wool shawls. Livestock are brought into stone stables built beneath the family home, their body heat rising through the floor as a living furnace for those sleeping above. The silence of a Wakhan winter is total, broken only by an axe splitting frozen yak dung or the distant roar of an avalanche on the peaks. But these long nights are not empty. Gathered around the hearth, elders pass down the valley's oral history, tales of wandering Sufis or spirits in untouched glaciers. The fire is the only light for months, and the smoke curling up through the Rauzan becomes its own kind of clock, marking how deep into the night the storytelling has gone. Without this nightly ritual, the identity of the Waki people would have dissolved into the stone centuries ago. What gives these stories their weight is the spiritual world beneath them. The Waki are Ismailis, practicing a gentle, mystical form of Islam built on inner meaning. There are no mosques here, only ostans, open-air stone shrines decorated with ibex and Marco Polo sheep horns. where travelers pause to pray before a dangerous pass. This is why a stranger is never turned away in the cold. To the Wakhi, a guest is a blessing, and even the poorest family will slaughter their last sheep to feed one. Out here, that law of hospitality isn't sentiment, it's how isolated people stay alive. Borders in the high country are often nothing more than lines drawn by people who have never seen the terrain. While the official maps dictate where one nation ends, the people of the valley look at the ridges differently. When colonial empires sliced through this geography in the late 19th century, they split ancient tribal lands apart. But a line on a map cannot erase 1,000 years of kinship. Alongside the well-known ancient trails runs a second network of roads, invisible, silent, and far older in spirit. Under moonless skies, small groups still lead unlit horses over 16,000-foot passes, navigating blind switchbacks where one misstep means a fall into nothing. It is a quiet generational refusal to let any government's boundary decide who belongs to whom. In the high country, human relationships will always find a way to flow around rock. In a landscape defined by brutal frost and frozen stone, the earth occasionally offers its own silent relief. Deep within the valley side canyons, hidden geothermal springs rise to the surface. These springs bubble up at a constant warmth even when the outside air drops far below zero. The rocks surrounding the pools are stained in vivid tones of orange and green from ancient mineral deposits. For the local community, these sanctuaries are more than just a place to wash wool. They are traditional social spaces where the heavy physical toll of mountain life is briefly lifted by the warmth of the earth. At the highest navigable passes, where the air becomes thin enough to feel like breathing silver needles, the valley's true sentinels keep watch. They carry no written maps. The terrain shifts too often for paper to be trusted. From within the earth, a more quiet threat is unfolding. The glaciers feeding the central river are retreating faster each year, making spring floods unpredictable and summer irrigation precarious. This inherited oral knowledge, survival data compressed into memory across generations, is the true reason the Wakhan has remained one of the safest corridors in Central Asia for 1,000 years. Today, two separate forces are reshaping this ancient sanctuary at once. From the outside, the first real roads are slowly prying open the isolation that preserved the Wakhan for centuries. From within the mountains, the glaciers that have fed the valley's rivers for thousands of years are retreating faster each decade, making the spring floods violent and the summer rivers dangerously low. The valley's young generation stand quietly at this crossroads, holding both a 1,000-year-old way of life and a borrowed phone catching its very first signal. As the final light of day fades behind the peaks of the Hindu Kush, the Wakhan settles back into its eternal rhythm. The empires that once drew the lines around this place have long since dissolved into the dust of history. The ancient river still runs, the wind still carves, the people still endure, and the question the valley asks of every traveler, every empire, every satellite passing overhead, remains the same. In a world built to reshape and conquer everything, are we brave enough to let one place stay wild, free, and unknown?